ethical leadership permeates an organization. Conversely, unethical leadership too permeates an organization. If leadership upholds ethics and integrity, so will employees, it is believed. Therefore, it's imperative that the leader walks the talk and leads by example. In this session on ethics and integrity, setting the tone at the top, we have with us a stellar panel. Mr. Ashwin Yadi, CEO India Capgemini, Mr. Rajiv Gupta, Managing Director and Senior Partner of Boston Consulting Group, and Mr. Venkat Raman SV, Managing Director, ANZ. Thank you for joining in. I'd like to start with you, Ashwin. Now, the tone at the top carries a significant amount of impact on a company's culture and corporate values. So how do you sort of set that tone in your organization?
And especially, we've seen that last 2 years have had a very, very big impact on organizations and culture. We've seen big impact with our employees, families, companies, and then also countries. And there are many new priorities and focus areas we see, topics like diversity, inclusion, and also focus on sustainability. All of this has really brought a lot of new things to the focus. And of course, the workplace culture will also be impacted because of this. In an organization, in terms of establishing culture and setting the tone, and I would like to quote Paulo Coelho, who said, and it's very nice, the world is changed by your example and not by your opinion. So opinions do matter, but what's very, very important is the leader has to lead by example, and that's how you take the culture and ethical behavior down the line. Capgemini has had 7 values which have shaped its culture over last several years. Honesty, boldness, modesty, trust, fun, team spirit being some of them. And every action we've driven has an underlying tone of these values. We take ethical behavior in practice very, very seriously. So again, when we hire new talent, when we onboard new talent, there is a lot of focus on trainings around code of conduct, ethical behavior, and various different aspects, so that it's ingrained in our every employee from day one. And again, some of this is also used in our own performance management. When we assess leaders, when we assess our team members, are they aligned to our values? And again, as a leader, there are only 3 ways you can do it. You can do it by example, and by example. So what you do ensure is, as a leader, you are not only preaching, but also practicing.
Rajiv, in your opinion, what are the elements of ethics and integrity, and how do you put these into action in your organization?
Thank you, Samya. Thank you for having me here on this extremely important topic. It's quite crucial that, this starts right at the top. And the fact is that, you look at any of us panelists, most of us are people who studied, worked for many years, got to a certain place, that hopefully we are able to contribute to our organization and to the community at large. And it's not how our organization does what we do with our revenues and profitability and so on. The one thing that can really upset a career built over decades of work is actually even coming close, not even violate it, but coming close in the gray area of ethics and integrity that can be misconstrued by somebody who sees it. It's in the eyes of the beholder, not in the eyes of what one has done. Therefore, to your question, what are the components of ethics and integrity? Because very important. I could have a slide to say these are the 8 building blocks of ethics and integrity and so on. But ultimately, it is in the eyes of the beholder, the people that we are serving in our teams, at our clients and so on. What do they perceive ethics and integrity to? In that sense, my personal mantra and what I also espouse within our firm is just do the right thing. And actually, you will realize that as soon as you truly believe that, then you don't need a framework, you don't need definitions. The right thing is rarely an area of gray. So that philosophy, just do the right thing for your work, for your people, for your clients, for your family, starts becoming that golden lodestar. And how do you drive it? There's no one leader, whether it's Venki or me or anyone else. Our entire senior team has to do that every day. There is no that I did it 99 times, I missed it once. That missing it once is not an option. It is not about the repercussion of what happens if you miss once. The trust is lost in that one incident. So to get it right 100 times out of 100 every day, every week, every year starts becoming critical. And that everyone in the leadership team has to understand and live.
Coming to you, Venkat, how do you set the tone in your organization?
So, and I think Rajiv made the right point when he said, do the right thing. And I think personally, how do I decide what is right here, right? And he's absolutely right that when you're trying to do the right versus wrong, there's very little gray there, right? So, but I follow 2 tests, So one is the organization has a purpose that we are all aligned to. For ANZ, that purpose is to let communities that we operate in thrive, right? So that's broadly why we exist as an organization. So the purpose test of what we do. So what we do, will it lead to the purpose being met is one test. The other one that I call the headline test is slightly different. If we were to be reported by Economic Times next day on what we did, would we feel bad or would we feel good or would we be neutral? If the feeling is neutral or bad, it's probably not the right thing to do. So I think that's the headline test that I like to follow. So that's on how to decide what is right to do, etc. How to set the tone? Obviously, the purpose and the values that the organization stands for are the guardrails around which we operate, and all employees realize that and recognize that. And that's, I think, the test of whether your culture is permeating well enough into the organization. There are only 4 other methods of making sure that whatever is being talked at the management level is being followed through and they run concurrently. One is communicate what is expected of everyone. I think the communication piece is really crucial. The second one is what management gets evaluated every day. We are always being observed. So the examples that we set are, I think, really crucial. So lead by example is the second method. The third one is provide a safe environment for reporting. Large organizations have multiple actions happening simultaneously all the time. And there could be some where somebody is feeling very uncomfortable operating under. In that case, we must provide as an organization a safe environment for that to be reported without any fear of victimization or a punishment, right? I think that's the third piece. And as a management person, the fourth one is recognize and reward what we constitute as the right behavior. So if you see right behavior, make sure it gets recognized, make sure it gets rewarded. I think if these 4 things are done, then you will see the culture and the points that we are trying to drive across the organization being coming through to where we want it to be. Similarly, creating enough traits in your leadership right through and creating common framework for leaders to operate in is also very important. So at ANZ, we have got 5 common leadership traits. So one is have a learning mentality, be curious, listen to what the people are trying to say. Similarly, create a shared clarity at every level, make sure that the strategy of the organization, the purpose of the organization are being discussed and explained to people. Similarly, connect with empathy, and that is where that whole fear psychosis and driving it away comes through. Once the team realizes that people are willing to listen, I think that gets sorted. The fourth piece is empower to report, empower to do whatever is needed to make the right decisions. And finally, allow people to grow selflessly. I think these 5 leadership trails, coupled with the guidelines of purpose and values, followed by an example setting top management, will help.
Absolutely. So it's a mix of intangibles and tangibles. What you feel is right, and then there's a framework that you bring in.
Correct.
Also, now there's this factor of change, and the only constant in business, and we've seen that in the last 18 months of COVID. How do you bring about alignment, and how do you sync the changing business needs and the values which are long lasting and do not change? Your views, Venkat.
Yeah. So, I spoke a lot about creating the right leadership values and things like that. I think that's important. I think what we have realized is having a well accepted, understood, fully internalized purpose of the organization really helps in situations like this. We should never, if that gets entwined into our DNA, then chances are that any change may impact the business up or down, or will require some business modifications to happen. But the guardrails are clear. What will we do definitely, and what will we not do surely, absolutely, is defined by our purpose and values. So within that, I think if you can moderate your business reactions to the changing environment, I think we are okay. So I think for me, making sure that the culture is well represented, driven through with a beautifully aligned, a completely understood and internalized purpose statement with a set of values codified by a procedure manual, if you may call it like that. It sounds old fashioned, but it's true. It's a code of conduct, So purpose followed by values with a code of conduct, which defines what people can do, should actually stand the test of time. And the test of a good purpose or a culturally well-developed organization is that, with the changing business circumstances, do we go to pieces, or we operate well within that environment and make sure that the business changes that we need to do to align to the changes in the environment works through. I think that's the supreme test. I think for me, the guardrails provided by culture, purpose, and the values drive the organization.
Now there's another bit, which is training. Coming to you, Rajiv. What are the building blocks of training in ethics and integrity? How do you enforce compliance through training?
See, 2 parts to that answer, Soumya, or my point of view on that. One is you use the word enforce compliance. Yes, obviously you need to enforce it. But how much of it is enforced versus how much of it is imbibed? That becomes quite critical. Enforcement is needed because if you violate, you not only endanger your own career, your own well-being, but you endanger your firm's reputation and so on with it. But there's only so much, as organization Venki was talking about. Any large organization has lots of moving parts on a day-to-day basis. To be brutally honest, not everything can be governed every day. So the imbibing of it becomes equally important. People have to behave in an ethical way, in a way that is filled with integrity on a day-to-day basis. So that's why, and that's how the training also needs to think about it. Part of it is the enforcement. How do you mandate formal training, whether it is virtual, whether it's in person and something, and I'll come to that in a minute. But part of it, and I think a large part of that conventional iceberg analogy, the training, everybody thinks how training, there's some module, there's something online, there's some session, etc. That's the proverbial tip of the iceberg. The real 90% of it that's below the water is how do people observe people behaving on a day-to-day basis. When things come to a head, when the rubber hits the road and there are points of conflict, then what is the decision you take? And is that decision something that is, let's say, the financially the best outcome versus ethically the best outcome? Those are the best moments of training there. I had the good fortune of working outside of India for many, many years. I was in UK for, almost a decade and a half. And in my early years in my career out there, I was subject to a lot of training that now is starting to become a bit of vogue, a bit more used to in India, to be fair. And in those days, I used to think, what is this training? It's just teaching me how to be politically correct. It's just teaching me X, Y, Z. I used to be actually quite dismissive about it. It's only when I was less younger that I started realizing the importance of some of that formal training and the fact that it happened so frequently and so regularly that it became second nature. I sometimes see that not becoming second nature with some folks, and I almost think that this needs to be imbued in them in a very repetitive manner. So that's one part of the formal training. How do you do it? You do it regularly, you mandate it, you do it very frequently, you take the same message, taking Venki's point on communication, you communicate that over and over and over again. People will feel bored, let them feel bored. This is too important a point for you to worry about how to make it very exciting. But that's, as I said, the 10%. The 90% is the day-to-day. When you have your governance, when you have your team meetings, when you are in a client situation, when you are in a real business situation, how do you behave? And there, the slightest hint of a behavior that is not ethical, how do you bubble that up? That doesn't mean necessarily going to an ombudsman and complaining and so on and so forth. But the liberty to even for me to tell my team member or somebody to tell me, look, I hear you, but I don't agree with you because of these reasons. That part is very difficult to codify, which is where the leadership and you use the word intangible. That's where the intangible part comes in.
Related question, Rajiv. Has the advent of social media made it tougher, simpler? Because now reaction time is less.
See, I, as a profession and as a passion, I do technology, I do digital. I believe in Yuval Noah Harari and his book on Sapiens that you really can't stop progress. Yes, things change and humanity has to evolve with it, not stop it. So personally, if you ask me, does social media help or impede? I think it helps. I think all the various digital tools, solutions help disseminate. They help create awareness. My daughter, who is hardly 15 years old, when she was asked to write a poem, and she wrote a poem on a very weird topic, but she linked it to Black Lives Matter. These things I don't think would have been possible when I was of the age of 15, to be fair. So the way the next generation thinks is very, very different, far more evolved, and a lot of that is credit to what's happening in social media. But every good thing has a downside to it. It's our job to manage the downside. The perception of something being slightly incorrect, the way it can quickly blow up in social media, leading to some very strong adverse consequences, even if it was right or wrong, is very high. And that's where we all need to balance ourselves and not just react or jump onto something that comes out of social media, but we have been given a brain, apply that, not just read and believe everything that has been said. So that's my view on social media.
So there's only one constant in business, they say, the change. While the values have been there for decades and they are not really fluid. So how does top leadership deal with this dichotomy?
So I think absolutely valid point. See, what happens is, one of our values is freedom. Okay, and what is the context behind the value of freedom? Okay, a few years ago when our founder started the Capgemini organization, it was freedom to choose. At that time there were one or two very large IT providers in the industry. So the message was freedom for our clients to choose different options. Okay. Now you look at it, that value still holds true. Even today as an organization, as a technology service provider, we work with our clients to give them choices and help them make the choices. Okay. Now you can extend that even to our employees. Our employees want freedom to choose their career. They want, and especially when you're dealing with today's workforce, Maybe 10 years ago, you had a workforce. I'm with Capgemini for last 25 years. As in when I hire somebody in today's campus, they would look at me in a very different way. Today's young graduates don't look at building careers for first 25 years in the same organization. So what do they want? They want freedom of choice. They want a freedom of their careers. They want freedom in picking up their projects, picking up technologies. Okay. So if you look at it, see, the underlying value has still remained to be freedom. Okay, to be free. Free was it was earlier focused a lot on freedom of choice of technology for our clients, and that continues. That's the way we operate. But what we also see today is it's extremely relevant for the workforce we deal with. They want freedom of choice in their careers, which technology they work, and so on and so forth. So what you really see is, to a large extent, the values of organization are constant. The manifestation of them, like the examples I gave you, varies during the years.
Absolutely. So values are steadfast while the manifestation of values changes. So Ashwin, for better or for worse, culture and leadership are inextricably linked. So how do you sort of set a culture for employees where they feel comfortable reporting any kind of misconduct?
Again, firstly, culture needs to be built over years. And what's very important is, first part of it is creating awareness about what the culture is. So what we do is, especially, for our employees, there are many different forums where they can speak up. In fact, one of the forum in itself is called as Speak Up. So if they have to report anything, it's an anonymous, online platform, and they can use it if they have to report any behavior. And then what's also, so that's more about creating the awareness. The second part is ensuring there is a platform available for the employees to speak up. But the most important thing is people see actions coming out of what they've spoken up. And that's probably that's the most important thing. If speak up, see any actions, then, pick up going forward, even if it's anonymous. So the third element, which we do very rigorously, is every aspect of employee speak up communication, which we hear, is addressed, and it's not addressed only in sort of one panel. But if there is an appeal to be done, employees can appeal upwards, if they're not happy with the resolution. So there is a very clear process defined. There is a platform defined. And there is a very strong feedback loop to ensure the concerns are addressed and resolved satisfactorily. So all of this makes it clear to the employees, to the workforce, that the values, the focus on ethics is just not in nice training material. And we have a lot of the training material on code of conduct, on competition laws, on diversity, inclusion. It's mandatory, but it translates to giving them the opportunity to address their concerns also. And I think that's very important, and that's how we do it.
Sure. Now, you all have talked about empowering employees, and a lot of it is imbibing, some of it is enforcing, mandating. How do you empower employees to report misconduct if they witness it? Venkat.
Look, as long as I go back to I'm sounding like a broken record, but culture is very crucial. If your culture is of the type that allows you to talk of success, failures, good, bad, without any worries, you will sense this, it'll come through naturally to people to actually question. And I think that's a very, very crucial point. But along with that, you need some enabling, processes and procedures, right? So one of the things that we have created is a responsible business committee, which is chaired by group CEO. So, that sets the tone, and that's what will drive every piece of our reaction to anything that happens in the business environment, and how we respond to it. Are we meeting the responsible business requirement? So that's the first, at the very top, we have got that. Look, humans are fallible. In general, we all make several mistakes in a day, right? So, humans are fallible, and we cannot we cannot be worried about that. But the question is, what are the remediating policies, right? So what we can do, what we have done, is create a group of trusted advisors, senior managers, people who have got influencing abilities, and encourage people to talk to them. Then not necessarily when they have a problem, encourage them to talk to the trusted advisors, even otherwise, because when you have a conversation, things will come out, and then the trusted advisor is trained enough to probe deeper. So I think that's one. Similarly, we have got an essential element of culture called speak up culture. So the speak up culture is constantly evaluated and tested, and we at the leadership level evaluate ourselves against that. What the people feel. Do they feel that it's a great organization to speak up, or do they feel hesitate all the time? Should I say it or not? Similarly, one of the things that we have tried, and it worked quite well, is create what we call as ethics champion. We all have issues around, when we make a decision. Is it right? Should I refund the customer? Shouldn't I refund the customer? Go and talk to someone who's an ethics champion. And these are, again, people who have seen banking from all aspects, who've been around in the industry, being a customer, being a delivery manager, and so on and so forth. Then a very well developed and articulated, communicated whistleblower program is another thing that has really helped for us, because it allows people to complain, it allows people to talk of worries that they have in their divisions without too much of concern about being spoken about after that. So there is a whole lot of confidentiality assurances that come with it. So we have created that. We have also created an ethical mechanism, which is a phone call. You can just pick it up, and you don't need to even identify yourself. You talk about the ethical dilemma that you are facing, or you have seen someone sort of operating on, and then it gets acted upon. So there are various methods to make sure that the organization enables this. But I think the biggest one is to make sure that the culture is that of a two-way communication, a leadership listening, leadership constantly talking to people, and having a shared clarity. I think that's what will make the culture really foolproof and bulletproof in this time and age with so many influences on people.
Any thoughts, Rajiv, on empowering mechanisms for employees?
No, absolutely. And I love the way Venki said, I'm going to actually borrow one of his point around fallibility of individuals. So while we can all take the high horse and say, ethics, integrity, all of these things very important, 100% adherence, etc. It's not that any of us, to be fair, have not made errors and errors of judgment. Even in the, at that point in time, we thought it was the right thing to do or whatever. We did something that I felt was extremely powerful. We had all our partners speak to our entire office, about that one time we did something wrong. And these were not like, oh, we worked too hard or we were too, it was genuine mistakes. And said, this is something I did. This is how I realized it was an error of judgment of whatever. And this is how I have learned from it. It has helped. And that one experience sharing thing that we've done, and we've now put it a bit of a ritual around it, has actually helped our people realize that, yes, people far more senior than us also have made mistakes. It is okay to make mistakes. It's okay to tell people that there's a mistake and come out. So, that was one tactical thing that worked. But from a process standpoint, look, what we try to adopt is, if anyone, empower people, encourage them through communications and all to speak up. But when somebody does come, the thing that makes it a virtuous cycle is listen to them very empathetically. Don't have somebody judge what they are saying, etc. Listen to the issue very, very empathetically. That's L. Act upon it. Take that in all its seriousness. Go speak to either them or the perpetrator or the alleged perpetrator or whoever, but go act on it. And 3, close the loop. Go back to the person who was concerned about this and say what you've done, what this meant, etc., and close the loop. That is what encourages everyone to then come again the next time, and so on and so forth. So again, while all the processes, and Venki's talked a lot about the processes and so on, those obviously have to be in place, and most good organizations will have that in place. But how you then enable that on a day-to-day basis every time such an issue comes up and never let it linger, that is where I think things really become real.
Absolutely. So clearly the takeaway is culture, values, consistent restating of values, and clear-cut leadership behaviors. These are the ones that infuse ethical standards into the businesses and its people. Thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you.